Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a chaotic, incredibly high-stake corner of the internet.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Our focus is a singular 3-hour-long video essay that was, well, meticulously crafted, it seems, to dismantle the reputation of a major content creator, Ethan Klein, EK.
And what makes this deep dive so necessary, I think, is that this critique was built almost entirely from the, let's say, highly toxic perspective of anti-fan communities.
That's right. We received a truly complex stack of sources detailing this public battle, which rapidly escalated. It went from just online drama to alleged defamation.
Right, involving accusations of financial misconduct, targeted harassment, even legal threats. It's a complete labyrinth, really.
And our mission today is to cut through the noise. We want to give you the shortcut, to understanding the precise factual claims made by the critic Cruel World Happy Mind, or CWHM.
And also the counter-evidence presented by EK and his team. And perhaps most crucially, the fundamentally controversial research methods that drove the entire production.
This dive is essential for anyone trying to navigate the modern media landscape. It really shows you how information can be manufactured and weaponized in the digital age. If you want to understand the mechanics that separate genuine fact-based criticism from targeted, high-effort defamation campaign, you really need to understand this specific case.
It perfectly illustrates what happens when content creation ethics collide head-on with information warfare. And the personal stakes are just alarmingly high.
What's fascinating here is the scale of the effort, too. I mean, this wasn't a casual reaction clip.
No, not at all. This was a polished, multi-hour production. Must have required hundreds of hours of research and editing.
And it immediately launched the entire conversation into a state of chaos. It demanded an equally massive public response from EK.
Yeah, this is information warfare waged at a premium level, you could say.
Let's begin with the contentious debut of the video itself. CWHM released this massive essay relatively late into what was already an ongoing drama cycle.
Right, and it featured this really aggressive thumbnail calling Ethan Klein a clown.
Our sources suggest CWHM may have been strategically motivated, maybe jumping in when she realized the anti-fan sentiment, while still present, was perhaps waning a bit.
Like a calculated attempt to tap into and, re-energize that base. The timing was definitely suspect to some.
But the foundation was the real controversy was. The video was immediately and heavily criticized because its core arguments, its evidence, relied almost exclusively on what are known as snark, or anti-fan talking points.
And to put a number on that reliance, one of our sources actually tallied a stunning 66 specific citations pulled directly from these anti-fan subreddits.
66. From communities dedicated solely to criticizing and compiling negative narratives about the subject. That isn't just gathering general online commentary.
No, it's like reading the hive mind and simply reciting its grievance.
EK's team argued that sourcing from a snark subreddit functions as a form of manipulation. They called it a thought-terminating cliché.
And this is a really important concept to unpack for you, the listener. A thought-terminating cliché is basically a catchy phrase or label designed to shut down debate.
How so?
It substitutes a concise, often judgmental label for what's actually a complex, nuanced argument. So in this context, CWHM essentially started with the conclusion that EK is terrible.
And then worked backward.
Exactly. Using the anti-fan forum as a pre-vetted source of evidence to fit that conclusion. And completely failing, it seems, to look at EK's own extensive public explanations or any opposing viewpoint.
CWHM later tried to defend this methodology, didn't she? Arguing she was gathering legitimate online commentary and that these snark communities are just efficient at aggregating clips and quotes.
Yeah, she did. She conceded she needed to adopt better sourcing practices, aspiring to the level of a journalist, maybe. But she ultimately maintained the distinction that she is doing internet deep dive, suggesting a lower standard of accountability.
But the problem with that distinction, surely, is that if you are pulling clips and quotes exclusively from spaces dedicated to hating your subject,
without acknowledging or countersourcing the subject's explanation,
you are not engaging in objective critique.
You're engaging in synthesis of malice, really. The inherent bias is just baked into the very structure of the research. There's no way around it.
Okay, now let's get into the specific personal accusation. Starting with accusation 1, the disturbing, teddy-fresh, childlike implication. CWHM focused heavily on Ethan Klein's clothing brand, Teddy Fresh.
Right, and its characteristic use of the teddy bear logo and that colorful aesthetic. She noted that Ethan's apparel feels very childlike and stated that she found this interesting.
That seemingly benign word, interesting, that was the key, wasn't it?
It was the mechanism for the smear, absolutely. It was used specifically to subtly suggest predatory behavior when you put it next to EK's old, edgy pedophile jokes from years ago.
It's an implication of guilt by association, basically, connecting a wife's current colorful fashion brand to her husband's, 15-year-old dark humor.
It's a vile, carefully structured implication, yeah. Very deliberate framing.
And the defense against this is crucial because it addresses both the fashion line and the historical context at the same time.
Right. Hila's team pointed out that her personal style is simply creative, vibrant, and colorful, and that CWHM was highly selective.
Only including photos that snark critics had already deemed childlike to support her framing.
Exactly. And as for the past content, EK directly addressed the Reddit account in question, which unfortunately was named Pedo Troll.
Not a great name.
Definitely not. But he clarified it was a novelty account popular during a specific era of the internet, maybe 15 years ago, intended to troll people with deeply insincere, dark, provocative humor.
And what's vital for context here, which CWHM completely omitted, is that EK revealed that 95% of that old account's activity, its actual posts, were about StarCraft 2, a video game.
95%. The name was intentionally provocative, meant to get a rise out of people by being insincere, which, by the standards of that specific internet era was the definition of trolling.
And CWHM deliberately failed to include or acknowledge that context. Instead, she used the name of the account to launch what EK called a psychopath implication against his current character.
It's the highest form of cherry picking, ignoring hundreds of posts about video game strategy to zoom in on a single controversial username from over a decade ago.
And then connecting it to current business practices to imply present-day psychological deviance. It's quite a leap.
Huge.
Okay, next up was the deeply troubling accusation 2, weaponizing mental health. CWHM insinuated that EK's frequent documented Tourette's tic, alongside his long history of speaking openly about his struggles with depression and anxiety,
suggested he was going crazy, framing it as online concern.
This specific framing, again, tied directly back to the snark page. It was based on a master post of concerns curated on one of those sites.
Yeah, EK accurately identified this as classic concern trolling. It's a manipulative tactic where you twist a person's genuine health struggles or vulnerabilities into a calculated attack on their stability or capacity.
And the analysis of CWHM's method seemed to confirm the malicious intent, right? She openly admitted she researched Tourette's comorbidity, the co-occurring conditions.
Which adds a really disturbing layer of calculation to the smear. She wasn't just observing, she was actively seeking confirmation bias to validate the narrative that his neurological condition confirmed he was having some kind of break.
This represents a profound lapse in ethics, using private or public admissions of mental health struggles as critical source material to question someone's sanity.
Absolutely. Instead of discussing the stigma around those conditions, she used them to question his professional capacity. It completely undermines any claim of objective critique.
It shows CWHM wasn't focused on the broader social issue or sensitivity at all.
No, she was focused on confirming the snark community's preconceived narrative.
Yeah.
That EK was mentally unstable and therefore guilty of all the other accusations too.
This level of intentional psychological framing, it's what separates critique from harassment.
I think that's a fair assessment, yeah.
Now we pivot from the realm of persona and psychological attacks into the more concrete, high-stakes accusations involving legal and financial matters.
Okay.
We have to start with the FUPA fund. This fund was established years ago via a GoFundMe, specifically to fight a significant copyright lawsuit against one person, Matt Hawk.
Right. And CWHM's critique focused on the aftermath. She criticized the Kleins for closing the fund after spending the money on their own legal fees for that case,
arguing they should have instead replenished the fund or kept it open indefinitely for other creators facing copyright.
And this specific criticism provided direct support to claims, notably pushed by Keemstar, that the Kleins had somehow scammed their audience.
But the defense here seems pretty straightforward based on understanding fundraising structure. EK repeatedly stated the fund was explicitly established and branded for that specific case, the fight against Matt Haas.
It wasn't set up as a perpetual legal defense fund for the entire creator ecosystem. That was never the stated goal.
Furthermore, they provided the financial context that CWHM omitted, the legal expense far higher than the initial amount rate.
Yeah. EK disclosed that the first legal bill alone was $50,000. He argued, quite logically, that successfully defending one lawsuit doesn't create a lifetime obligation for him to fund every creator's future legal battles around the world.
It's a critical distinction, isn't it, between private fundraising for a specific goal and, say, a nonprofit organization.
Exactly. The FUPA fund was a private effort for a specific defense. CWHM and the snark community tried to frame it as if it were some kind of generalized legal aid nonprofit, which carries fundamentally different legal and ethical obligations.
Our sources confirmed that the fund's goal was always explicitly tied to that initial fight. Purpose was clear from the start.
So the fact that CWHM continued to push the narrative that the Kleins were somehow obligated to keep it open or replenish it, despite the public record and the high cost of the litigation.
It demonstrates a clear effort to perpetuate the scam narrative originated by their detractors.
It seems that way, yes. She consistently prioritized the popular negative talking point over the easily verifiable financial and legal facts.
Okay, moving on. We encounter arguably the most bizarre and disturbing element in this whole saga, the human skulls incident.
Oh, boy.
CWHM suggested that EK might have sent himself human skulls as part of some kind of victim narrative.
She did hedge it slightly, citing that she couldn't completely absolve him, but then in the same breath called the idea that EK sent himself skulls preposterous.
Which is confusing. EK expressed genuine astonishment that CWHM wouldn't simply concede this preposterous point entirely.
Understandably. He confirmed the skull delivery was a real threat, investigated by authorities. He noted the skulls cost between $1,000 and $2,000 apiece.
Making the concept of him buying and sending them to himself, alongside all the other severe harassment tactics, seem completely implausible.
Right, but CWHM tried to keep the door open by noting the museum that provided the documentation verified the skulls being sent by a VPN. She used this detail to sort of fuel the self-shipping theory.
But here's the analytical break, right? The fact that authorities verified the skulls were sent from a VPN doesn't absolve the actual sender.
Not at all. It simply identifies the method used to conceal their identity. Using a VPN is entirely consistent with a genuine, sophisticated harasser trying to terrorize the victim while covering their tracks.
So CWHM's insistence on leaving the self-shipping theory open, even while labeling it preposterous.
It highlights her primary objective: leave no stone unturned that could possibly support a malicious interpretation, no matter how remote the possibility.
It's the definition of irresponsible speculation disguised as neutral.
Pretty much. The refusal to acknowledge a 0% chance that EK fabricated the delivery of human remains, especially given the documented cost and complexity. It's highly telling of the video's underlying.
She was clearly more afraid of contradicting the most extreme elements of the snark narrative than making a reasonable, fact-based assertion.
That anxiety about alienating the extreme anti-fan audience is a recurring theme here, definitely. It manifests as avoiding stating verifiable truth if it runs counter to the pre-established narrative of EK as this calculating manipulator.
Okay, finally, in this section we have the blackface claim, which EK and his viewers argue was taken completely out of context.
Yes, CWHM referenced EK's possible blackface from his past, citing an image posted on a detractor subreddit.
EK's viewers and his team countered that the original content, which was, 15 years old, it was titled The Black Challenge.
Right. In the video, they used a combination of spray tans and charcoal face masks, doing everything in black. It was a bizarre attempt at an edgy challenge, perhaps, but not a deliberate attempt to mock black people.
EK directly challenged CWHM to state explicitly whether she believed the content constituted blackface, instead of just hiding behind the implication.
And this is the core rhetorical tactic at play again. Using words like possible or allegedly allows the critic to introduce the defamatory assertion without technically making the direct claim herself.
She asserted it was blackface simply by displaying the out-of-context images and then moving on, prioritizing the negative label while omitting the necessary context.
The omission of context is the mechanism of the lie here. The existence of the video titled The Black Challenge completely changes the frame. It shifts it from malicious racial mockery to simply a very tasteless, poorly executed internet challenge from a bygone era.
And CWHM used the ambiguity created by that omission to maximize outrage and confirm the narrative of EK having this toxic past.
Exactly. It fit the pattern.
Moving firmly into the dynamics within the business now and the relationships with employees and guests, we begin with the financial fallout of the Frenemies podcast, specifically the 5% production cut.
Ah, yes, Frenemy. The arrangement with co-host Trisha Paytas famously gave her a 45% cut of the revenue,
with EK receiving an extra 5% that was specifically allocated for production costs.
CWHM seized upon this 5% cut. She scrutinized it, arguing that if the show was immensely successful, pulling in millions of views, massive ad revenue, and the apparent production costs were minimal.
She cited a basic fabric backdrop, a table, and base salary.
Then EK was disproportionately taking that 5% chunk of revenue for himself as extra profit. That was the accusation.
Okay, but here's where the analysis needs the most context, right? CWHM failed to provide the full financial picture of running the entire H3 operation,
which is far more complex than just a basic backdrop. We're talking about an enterprise with dedicated full-time staff, sound engineers, video editors, producers, camera operators.
Plus the overhead of a large physical studio, equipment, maintenance, security, all of that.
So 5% of the gross revenue from a massively successful, high-volume live show, which garnered millions of views and potentially tens of millions in ad revenue, is actually a significant, arguably necessary production.
The underlying critique relies on a flawed premise that EK was pocketing huge sums from the 5% while providing minimal production.
When in reality, running the H3 show is a substantial operation, and that 5% cut was, according to EK's team, a fully justified contractual production expense. It was intended to maintain the quality and infrastructure that made the show successful in the first place.
So CWHM wasn't actually revealing some hidden scam.
No, she was simply questioning publicly whether the 5% was truly used for production or just profit, while intentionally ignoring the scale of the required infrastructure to make the show happen.
It sounds like a critique rooted in ignorance of large-scale content production, frankly.
It does seem that way. And this inability, or perhaps unwillingness to grasp the scale, leads us directly into the claims about employee and guest treatment.
Which CWHM used snark talking points to imply poor management and misconduct.
Yeah, she specifically highlighted crew layoffs and, notably, the mental health break taken by employee Olivia. The implication was that poor management was the cause of employee stress.
However, the sources provided a crucial counter-narrative here. The employee base is generally considered well-treated, by most accounts.
And Olivia's break was primarily and publicly attributed to the severe, targeted harassment she was receiving from snarkers and anti-fans.
The very communities CWHM was sourcing her critique from. That's ironic.
Deeply ironic. CWHM was further criticized for misreporting Olivia's employment status, implying she had quit when she had only taken a temporary break, falsely suggesting some kind of employee.
This is a perfect example of the self-fulfilling prophecy of the snark community then. They harass an employee until she needs a break.
And then the critics cite the break as evidence of poor management by the target of their harassed circular.
Okay, what about the next major incident, the Jimmy Lee?
Right. CWHM criticized EK for having, quote, chill pal buddy time with Jimmy Lee, a guest who had faced accusations of touching girls. She framed EK as condoning the behavior.
But the omission of context here seems flagrant. EK countered that Lee showed up unannounced and uninvited to the office.
Exactly. And furthermore, rather than offering chill pal buddy time, EK actually roasted Lee publicly on the show. He aired out his problematic behavior to tens of thousands of viewers.
So the claim that it was some relaxed, condoning interaction is just factually incorrect.
It seems designed purely to maximize outrage and link EK to predatory behavior by association, regardless of the facts of the interaction.
Then there was perhaps the most sensitive accusation, the Gabe segment. CWHM claimed that EK was using his friend Gabe, who has an intellect, for content and engagement, implying severe exploitation.
This was a really serious claim. EK's team countered it severely, arguing that CWHM's framing implies that Gabe doesn't deserve to be able to be on the H3 podcast or to have friends that make content with him.
It's like the application of a hypercritical snark lens, which views any interaction involving a disabled person on a large platform as inherent
Right, thereby removing the person's own agency and ability to be part of a creative community. The implication is that a person with a disability cannot make autonomous decisions to participate in content creation, which is deeply dehumanizing.
EK's defense centered on the fact that Gabe is a valued member of the community and a willing participant.
And the suggestion of exploitation was a calculated way to leverage a very sensitive topic for maximum emotional impact, they argue.
Finally, let's address the controversial JonTron interview. CWHM, using a clip from another critic, Goenaro, argued EK gave JonTron a platform months after controversial statements just to defend him.
Suggesting EK was cynically exploiting the situation for content and trying to rehabilitate a controversial public figure.
But EK explained the nuanced history there. JonTron was a close friend at the time.
And the interview was apparently planned specifically as an opportunity for JonTron to apologize for his controversial statements and address the backlash. That was the stated in.
EK admitted the interview became incredibly awkward because JonTron sort of closed down during the planned segment, refusing to fully engage with the apology.
Which threw off EK, who admitted to being an inexperienced interviewer at the time. That's his explanation.
So the criticism that EK was baiting JonTron for content fails to account for the actual well-documented history of their friendship and the supposed pre-show agreement to discuss the issue.
But wait, if EK admitted he was an inexperienced interviewer during that segment, doesn't that lend some credibility to the criticism that he ultimately failed to handle the sensitive topic appropriately, regardless of his intention?
That's a key point, yeah. The failure might have been an execution, not necessarily intent. EK's admission of inexperience acknowledges the criticism that the interview resulted in a poor outcome for that sensitive conversation.
But CWHM framed this failure not as a misstep in interview technique, but as deliberate, cynical exploitation designed to monetize JonTron's content. That's the difference.
The context CWHM omitted was EK's emotional investment, perhaps, as a friend trying to facilitate an apology for another, which backfired.
So the core takeaway from all these business and personal claims seems to be a consistent pattern.
CWHM would find a kernel of truth, financial split, a temporary layoff, an awkward interview, and then package it with the most malicious, unsourced interpretation provided by the anti-fan.
Intentionally omitting any exculpatory context available in EK's own extensive public explanation. That seems to be the recurring method.
This next section is critical because it demonstrates the immediate, overwhelming pressure CWHM.
Yeah, from the very audience she was seemingly trying to appeal to.
It showcases the intense politicization of online and also provides necessary context for EK's own political office.
The major flashpoint was the Israel-Palestine. CWHM initially referred to it as a war in her.
This immediately prompted severe backlash, importantly, not from EK's fans, but from the anti-Ethan pro-Hasan detractors.
Right. They viewed that language as insufficient and demanded she use the specific term genocide.
This pressure resulted in a highly public and arguably humiliating apology from CW. She issued a subsequent statement declaring unequivocally that Israel is 100% committing a genocide.
And she claimed she initially used the softer language because she was afraid of censorship. She feared EK's audience would mass report her video as promoting terrorism, getting it removed.
But EK's actual political history severely complicates her narrative of fear. Our sources note that EK has condemned the Israeli government and criticized the human toll of the conflict for over a decade.
Yeah, his often misunderstood connection to Israel seems to stem more from his upbringing, where people feel strong existential threat and a historical fear of anti-Semitism.
So that sense of existential threat rooted in cultural history colors his political commentary. It makes it distinct from just a simple, uncritical endorsement of current governmental action.
Exactly. So CWHM's assertion that she was afraid of his audience mass reporting a video that used the term genocide kind of ignores his own consistent history of criticizing the government and speaking openly about the conflict.
It sounds more like a projection of her own political vulnerability, maybe?
It could be interpreted that way, yeah. The conflict quickly intensified existing feuds within the creator space, too. EK unfollowed Frogan,
who had close ties to him but supported Palestine and publicly celebrated certain events that were viewed by EK as supportive of Hamas.
And then there's the ongoing high-intensity fixation on controversial streamer Hasan Piker.
Yeah.
EK believes Hasan's rhetoric fueled and directed severe harassment towards him,
including the Child Protective Services, CPS calls, and that human skulls delivery we talked about.
Right. This whole political minefield quickly resulted in CWHM becoming the victim of the very type of intense audience pressure she was attempting to leverage against EK.
Her attempts to appease the new audience she was courting shifted the focus away from her EK and onto her own perceived political inadequacy.
Yeah, the dynamic flipped on her very quickly.
This political pressure also connects directly to the cult accusation, which CWHM doubled down on later. She insisted that EK's close, highly moderated following is a cult.
Using common criteria like intense moderation in Discord and subreddits, having a fan base name foot soldiers, and, naming their enemies.
She also implied EK uses love bombing towards his audience by saying things like, "Hey guys, I love you."
Okay, this is a perfect opportunity to clarify some important psychological terms that were really misused here. EK and his team provided necessary clarification, emphasizing the difference between a supportive fan base with strong community moderation and a bona fide cult.
Specifically, let's address the love bombing claim. That term has a very precise psychological definition.
It does. Love bombing is an emotional manipulation tactic. It involves showering a person with excessive affection and attention specifically to gain control over them and increase their dependency.
Simply telling your audience, "I love you," isn't really bad.
No, that's fostering a parasocial relationship, a one-sided connection that fans often experience toward media figures. It's an asymmetrical bond, very common in media.
But it is not, by definition, the manipulative emotional tactic of love bomb, which seeks to dismantle the recipient's autonomy.
Exact. CWHM relied on buzzwords sourced from the anti-fan community to frame EK's community as toxic and controlled. Again, displaying maybe a lack of depth in understanding these critical psychological terms.
The ultimate irony of the entire backlash comes to a head with what we're calling the harassment paradox.
Yeah, this part is wild. CWHM publicly stated she was expecting all the hate to come from EK's dedicated fans.
But instead, she received bizarre messages from people outside the H3 fanbase. She was even trolled by the controversial figure Bad Empanada,
who emailed her using EK's lawyer's name to threaten her.
The fact that she was successfully trolled by one of the most notorious figures in the anti-Ethan ecosystem just shows how unfamiliar she was with the audience she was trying to align with.
Total. The sources clearly show CWHM spent subsequent videos attempting to appease this anti-Ethan crowd Hasan fans, snarkers showing clear fear of that audience.
So the inescapable conclusion really drawn from the fallout is that she was more afraid of the people she was trying to align with than the subject attacking.
Which suggests the video was maybe a transparent attempt at audience capture, designed to win over a large, pre-existing detractor group, rather than a genuine pursuit of honest critique.
That's certainly one interpretation of the events.
This final section is critical as we look at CWHM's defense after the fact and her fundamental refusal to take responsibility for key factual inaccuracies.
Which ultimately confirms the negligence in her research methodology, you could argue.
Let's start with the snark source methodology post-mortem. CWHM admitted yes to sourcing heavily from snark subreddits, accounting for those 66 citations.
Arguing she was just gathering necessary clips and online commentary.
While she expressed a generic desire to maybe improve her sourcing in the future, she maintained that distinction. She's doing internet deep dives, not journal, implying she operates under a lower standard of it.
But the deeper critique, she clearly started with the conclusion and worked back, failed to look at EK's extensive public explanations or opposing viewpoints.
The bias was structurally built into the methodology from the ground up, relying entirely on material curated for maximum malice, zero.
Now let's examine the aftermath and the refusal to concede on the facts. CWHM's response video was widely deemed a masterclass in apology, but only for it.
Exactly. She apologized profusely for being insensitive or for her framing, but notably and consistently refused to remove the video or apologize for the core defamatory.
She specifically refused to retract the video, despite later admitting that certain claims, like the childlike dress critique, were factually wrong or maybe poorly framed.
This refusal to correct the record and take down the inaccurate information has severe real-world legal implications.
This is where we need to explain the legal concept of punitive. This is a crucial EK and his team discussed the idea of suing CWHM, not just for compensatory damages money to cover the actual loss,
but for punitive damage, which is different. This type of damage award isn't meant to cover the loss. It's meant to punish the defendant for malicious or negligent behavior.
And deter future destructive actions.
Precisely. CWHM's refusal to retract or apologize for the core factual inaccuracies prolongs the damage and, legally speaking, suggests malicious intent, or at least negligence.
Every view, every ad read generated on her video after she knew the facts were wrong potentially became part of the legal calculation. To argue she should be monetarily punished to dissuade this behavior from happening.
The refusal to simply say, I was wrong and I'll take the video down, it speaks volumes about prioritizing views and revenue over journalistic integrity or accountability for harm caused.
Perhaps the clearest example of this negligence and deflection is the lying by omission regarding the Child Protective Service.
Right. CWHM stated that EK blamed anonymous users for the call with manipulated evidence regarding the CPS visit to his home.
EK argued this statement is a clear case of lying by omission. CWHM failed to reference or fact-check the specific manipulated evidence she claimed,
setting a false expectation for her audience that he was just fabricating claims about his harassment, when the truth is the CPS call details and the severity of the harassment campaign, including specific details of the call, are factually backed up in their public lawsuit file.
By using the loaded term manipulated evidence without providing any documentation or context, CWHM insinuated dishonesty on part,
fueling the narrative that he fabricated the CPS issue to gain sympathy, when the reality is that event was a confirmed threat instigated by trolls tied directly to the anti-fan community she was sourcing from.
Furthermore, EK pointed out the profound cruelty of this particular claim. He noted that CWHM had no right to comment on how he raised,
especially as a parent who had just gone through an invasive, traumatizing CPS visit instigated by internet troll. It weaponizes family and reputation in a way that really transcends mere criticism.
It moves into the realm of intentional cruelty, argued.
Yeah, the CPS claim, the skull delivery, the financial accusations, these were all severe, high-stakes accusations. And what we see in CWHM's defense is not a retraction of the claims,
but an apology for the tone, making the entire follow-up feel performative rather than accountable.
The takeaway for anyone watching the media space is pretty clear. The quality of a deep-dive essay isn't determined by its length or its production value or even its citation count.
It's determined by the integrity of its sourcing and its willingness to present a fair representation of the counter-arguments.
And CWHM's video failed that test completely. #outro.
So what does this all mean for the broader creator economy? We've explored the intense level of scrutiny applied to high-profile creators. CWHM dedicated, hundreds of hours to a 3-hour deep dive?
And yet it failed spectacularly due to core sourcing and clear, aggressive confirmation bias. It just fell apart under scrutiny.
The case highlights the dangerous ethical tightrope content creators walk. When you engage in high-effort critique, you have to balance legitimate analysis with the real-world impact of misinformation.
Especially when it targets family and reputation. CWHM's video was ultimately less about objective research and more about packaging pre-existing, highly charged narratives supplied by these anti-fan echo chambers.
The resulting backlash CWHM faced from the very community she tried to impress and align with underscores a key lesson for content creators who choose to enter the drama.
Definitely. In an environment of information overload, transparency, accurate sourcing, and genuine critical thinking are really the only defenses against being consumed by the very drama you seek to cover.
She spent the entire aftermath in a state of appeasement, terrified of the extreme snark community, proving she was captured by the audience she tried to.
It raises an important question that CWHM herself inadvertently introduced early in her career. She was previously criticized for stepping away from covering multi-level marketing, or MLM, schemes.
Because she stated she felt bad punching down on corporations. Remember that?
Yeah. So does the online critique ecosystem now treat large, successful content creators like Ethan Klein with the same intense scrutiny and narrative hostility usually reserved for actual predatory institutions like MLMs?
It seems like when creators build a substantial platform and infrastructure, they effectively become the establishment of a certain platform,
automatically turning them into high-value targets for perpetual high-effort takedown. But the critical difference is that the ethical rules of journalistic investigation are often dropped entirely,
replaced by the malicious logic of the anti-fan subreddit.
Yeah.
So something to mull over. The next time you see a multi-hour deep dive essay promising to pull back the curtain on a major figure, maybe pause and ask yourself,
is this truly exhaustive, objective research? Or is this just reading the script that was already written by the most dedicated segment of the detractor community?
If the sourcing is an echo chamber.
The conclusion is predetermined. Simple as that.
That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.